Ditto. Let's jump in.
Happening.
Let's jump into this. This movie is really fun and special, and I want to talk. We have time. I want to talk a little bit of career stuff, but like just starting with this, like you have in this film so many great talents, like across time, directing all these different people, working with them, creating these circumstances where they kind of come together and interact. Like, can you talk a little bit about that and like how fun it was, how challenging, fun, or daunting, or any of those things? All the above?
I guess, I mean, it's a trip, of course, I mean, like you kind of know these people, but you don't, you know what I mean? Me
Yeah.
being, I'm one of these people that when I meet a really famous person, I feel like I have to tell them who they are, like I'm like, wow, you're Robert De Niro, So I'm eternally a fan, So and these guys I'm a super fan of. So yeah, it's a trip, and hard to kind of explain.
Yeah,
Like
I
being
mean,
on
well, it's interesting because like you have to tell them who they are and like you're but you have an idea of the characters and so and you've done I mean, going back to even Guide to Recognizing Your Saints, you've been this is not new for you, right, in your projects, but like working with major talent. But I guess in this instance, are where do you kind of let the personality like Bill Murray, like where's the Bill Murray that we all know, and then where are you like, hey, let's kind of bring out this or try that with the character?
Well, I mean, what's kind of always shocking and exciting for me is how good actors these people are. And I'm not trying to be a nice guy, I'm just kind of like, because there's the persona that and then they come in and it's a character that I don't know either. I mean, sure, at 2 in the morning, you're trying to change some words because you think you're a genius. And then somebody shows up and then it's like, oh, this is who they are. So with Bill Murray, it was, he's a tall guy. I didn't expect him to be so tall. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm more in awe of that initially. But all acting to me blows me away. I love it so much. I'm not an actor myself. I have a heart attack if you put the camera on me. Although this works, the Zoom
The
situation.
Zoom's cool, yeah.
It's okay. I feel safe. But I'm in awe of it. I love it, and I love to watch it and sort of learn from it. So I'm a little bit more of a. I don't really tell anyone what to do. I mean, I'm in awe of those directors. I mean, Brian De Palma's maybe my favorite, and Spike Lee. And I know from what I've read, Brian De Palma tells you where to put the cigarette down, and I wish I had that kind of talent. I'm more of an observer, and I'm kind of a decent truth meter, I think.
Hmm.
So it's really most exciting to sort of see who shows up to the room, and then you start playing together, it's a collaborative thing,
Yeah,
and
when
every
you when you say truth teller, when you're in the moment with them and you're kind of like, great talent and you're watching them do something, do you try and be a barometer for like moments that work, moments that feel honest, and then let them know? Like, I feel like this is like, how do you handle giving a note to a great talent that you respect and admire, but you think there's something else for them to explore?
well, I mean, they're usually pretty good tellers themselves, I mean, we're all searching, I'm not a big rehearsal guy, I like to walk them through the location so they're not, well, especially if it's their house in the movie, like, hey, this is your house. We walk through it. We might talk a little bit, but I like to save it and then watch it and it's oh man, how do you tell them? I don't know. You kind of just watch and you kind of I think we kind of just know it, it's like a weird thing, like I don't know. I wish
Yeah.
I had a good answer for that. I'd put it in a book.
When you're another person in the movie, she's great. She's been really popping off lately and a lot of stuff. Jennifer Coolidge. What is it like? What was it like working with her and in this character? What was the process like and or the process of bringing her onto it?
Yeah, well, she was the first person on, which is a dream, and I'm the worst person with knowing who people are besides the obvious. I watch freaking Beast Games and freaking 90 Day Fiance. So if you're on those, I know who you are, but I never know who anyone is. And John Polano, who had written this originally as a play, I remember, we were messing around with it, and I remember thinking, it's kind of like who's afraid of Virginia Woolf? But everybody's Virginia Woolf, you know? And I was thinking, who could handle Virginia? You know, who's Elizabeth Taylor today, you know? And I was watching White Lotus, which is about as highbrow as it gets for me. And I'm thinking, who is this lady? She's freaking great, you know? And my wife is like, that's Miss Stifler or whatever the hell everyone knows her by. And I was the last person to know who Jennifer Coolidge is, but I was so in awe of her on that show that I'm like, oh my God, there she is. That's Virginia Woolf. So we were so lucky. We got to her manager Tiffany, and she said she joined. And then it, you know, turns out she's kind of a big deal, and really
It's no,
too.
did snowball kind of other people are like, oh, cool, I'll come in too, like that sort of thing.
I think, you know, and I mean, it's always I don't know how this stuff works, you know? I mean, it's like I was very lucky that I went through a thing called the Sundance Labs years ago, and Ed Harris was an advisor of mine. And I'm not one to keep hitting up actors, but I remember reading this and thinking, man, he would just kill this role. So I still keep their emails, you know? And so I just sent him an email in the middle of the night, and he responded in the middle of the night, and he said, I'll read it. And it was like a day later. He says, "Sounds kind of fun." And I mean, that sounds like very weird Wonkaville stuff, but it worked out. And then, of course, you know the rest of them. And then there's great actors that people don't know, like Miles Harvey, who plays the young guy DJ. This freaking guy is
Yeah.
like, he came into an audition. I'm like, that's it, done deal. That's him. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
that's
it's
kind of
not.
having that combination of people who are known and not known, right? And like new and exciting and not new, known, not so, like that's a great way to build something. Can you tell me a little bit about, because it's coming up, or I don't know what status you're in, but like After Exile seems like a really interesting project, or where you
Yeah,
are with that?
I don't know what's happening with that. You know, I mean, you know, it's like this IMDb insanity. I try, I don't know what's going on that crazy site, you know? I also know is every once in a while I get a whole bunch of, because my email seems to be out there. So, hey, I don't mind. I don't have that many people that write me, but I don't know what's happening with that. It's a really great script. So who knows? Yeah, the guy
Yeah.
who wrote it wrote a great script. So who knows? I sure hope all the great scripts get made, you know?
Yeah, do you get a lot of like what's you solicit the stuff that's kind of interesting to you or exciting, and or do you wait for things that like what's the dynamic for you when finding the next projects? Like Riff Raff's a good example of something, and I know the process of something coming to life takes a while, but like, how does it fielding what's out there versus like going out and sort of working, collaborating with a writer and being like, this is something I want to do, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you know, waiting in this business is insane, you know. So I sure as heck don't do it, you know. I don't know. I mean, I write myself a lot, you know, so but you know, I don't care. I mean, you know, I was that crazy kid that ran around with a cassette trying to get a record deal. So once in a while I get a wacky, you know, thing on Facebook or Instagram and they're like, I got that, you know, sometimes it's like, you know, I killed two people and I'm like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be responding to this guy. But you know, you get I don't know where they come from. I'm just always excited to at least look at an idea. I don't care who it's from. Again,
Yeah.
this was great because the guy who wrote it is a friend and he writes incredible plays mainly. And it was a play. So that's how this one came. But write me on Instagram, I might answer. I don't know. I'm a nut,
Yeah.
you know.
It's someone crazy has a crazy story, and you'll be like, hey, sure, let's try
I
it.
mean, as long as you're not the actual murderer, although even if you are the murderer, hopefully you've not done it recently, then
So
then
you're
I'm
looking out in the world for the stories that are going to grab you, and like you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
find
who
real
knows?
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, you never know, you know, something that hits you. I mean, you know, for me, it's got to feel personal to some degree, you know. I remember when I was working on a film, my wife was watching Game of Thrones, and I don't know what anything is. Like I'm totally lost, you know, all the time. And she's telling me stuff, and then she's like, "Oh, the mother of all dragons." And I remember saying like, "What? What do you mean?" Well, finally I listened, you know, and I'm like, "What is that, a gang?" And she's like, "No, it's like a dragon." I go, like a real dragon?" And I'm like, "Okay, I can't." So if you're sending me something with like I need some reality in my life. So,
You
although
have to relate.
I would
I
love the
like
Mother of All Dragons gig, but I thought it was a gang. So,
I like your version of that is that it's a gang, like it's a
okay,
biker gang or something.
that's what it sounded like, you know. And I'm like, wait,
It's
dragon, and they have dragon babies? What are you crazy? You know, that doesn't work for me. Yeah.
I
Although it seems to be pretty successful without me, so
I like that you want to find something that is connected to something you can be authentic with. That's not
sure.
just what in your background, like, I mean, you're from New York, but like, what are the things that sort of drive you to like, this is authentic, this is honest for me, this is like, I can sink into this. And like, what are the things where you're like, I mean, obviously, if it was about dragons, you just said, but like, what are the things that are like, oh yeah, that's it. Like, what's the hallmark of that for you?
Well, I really don't know. I mean, I do know dragons are off limits, but even that, I mean, it's weird. Like, I did a movie called Boulevard, and a guy wrote it about coming out at 60. You know, he had been married, and something really moved me about it. You know, it was his first script, and my mother wasn't gay, but I always had this weird feeling about her, but something really. It's usually either like my mother or my father is in that script, or a good friend somewhere in my mind. And then I sort of get excited. So it's always a personal thing for me, but I don't know where it's coming from. I mean, sometimes it's, the killing, or sometimes it's just life.
Yeah, like just the experience of
It's an emotional thing,
it's
right?
yeah.
You
If
can
if
feel.
when you go back to like a guide to recognizing your saints, like earlier on, and then Empire State, like before Boulevard, what kind of like what drew you into those projects initially? Like what kind of happened with those ones?
Well, Saints was, I wrote it as a book in pen because I had nothing I had nowhere to live. I mean, it's a long, weird story, but I just wrote this ridiculous book in pen. And a guy I used to work at Tower Records with in New York was a publisher, David We May. And if 10 people bought it, I would be really surprised. And one happened to be Robert Downey. And I worked at a music studio, and Robert was coming in and out recording an album at the time. And we just sort of always ran into each other. And he was one of the 10 people out there that had read it. And this ridiculous idea that we both of us were crazy enough to think maybe we can do a movie. And I remember thinking, oh man, I wish I could get a chance to write this. And so I started copying a script called United States of Leland, because I know that Trudy Styler, who produced it, she liked it. So I got a physical copy of it, and I was copying INT. I thought meant introducing, and EXT I thought meant exit, and then but I just put my, like, Microsoft Word, so a lot of spaces, and I would put, okay, exit this street, but I would put my streets in. And then Robert came in one day, and I go, Robert, why do they keep repeating that they're exiting a street? He goes, that's exterior. So that was my first lesson in script writing, and how I was sucked into this weirdness.
What an amazing story. I've never heard that before.
It's very weird.
So
And
he
interior too. It was introducing. I'm like, why are they reintroducing this street? It's like it's interior. So it works like that. But so that was a nice lesson to have here.
the book in pen, you wrote the whole thing, right?
You don't mess around with that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't
I've
erase.
moved on to the computer.
You type now?
It's
Some
internet.
people will be like, I type on a typewriter still. Like there's some people, but you're like, no, I
Yeah,
wrote in
yeah.
pen.
No, my father was a typewriter mechanic from Nicaragua. I've seen enough typewriters to not want to be a part of that. I
So
will happily go into the future. Yeah.
you wrote it in pen, and he read it, he connected with you over it. How like once you're out there making that movie, were you just like, I can't believe we're here, this is happening, we're
I,
making.
Again, this is the ridiculous, nutty world. I mean, I'm like Mr. Magoo, like, I mean, I didn't plan to do this, like I said, my father was a typewriter mechanic. I don't come from this world. I just wanted a job, and I had a nice job. I worked in a dub room in a music studio. So life was pretty good. So this kind of was an opportunity. And then, Sundance Labs was a big part once I got brought into that, which was another weird trip. Yeah, it just kind of was like, well, I could do this, and maybe it's a little better than all the awful jobs I've had. Um, I mean, it's pretty fun, and I love it, so
So
yeah, I
many
don't miss.
great, so many, you've worked again, like going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, so many great actors on screen. And it seems like you have you're giving them all the credit, but you have some part of it, especially with that one with Saints, like early in some careers or at interesting points in various careers. Um, Do you think it's the material that draws them, or do you have a way of communicating about it that you think
I
is,
think it's always I think it's always the writing,
yeah,
always. Always, always. Like, and that's maybe the secret ingredient that I have the luck that I can mess around a little bit with it and maybe make it a little more real or bring something to it that people because I don't think anybody wants to hang out with me that bad. I'm really not fun, unless you watch 90 Day Fiance, but I'm not, but I really love this world and I downplay it in that sense because I'm kind of shocked, just like anybody else, I get to do it. It's weird. But but it's worth all the craziness, but yeah, but it's always the writing, man. If you're gonna get, I think, good actors if it's good writing, and everything else is candy.
kind of hard to find the good writing, right? Like there's a lot of writing out there, but is there a
A
lot of
lot.
good writing? Like that's the other
It's like
thing.
there's a lot of pictures out there. There's a lot of everything out there now.
Yeah.
But people always talk about, oh, the 70s were so great for directors. And I'm like, yeah, for 10, yeah, out of those 10, it was freaking incredible. Now it's good for 10,000. I'll take that. So yeah, I mean, but there is incredible writing out there, and there's also the nice thing about it is it's not a secret club anymore. So you can really be shocked every once in a while, like, wow, you wrote that? Okay, we'll figure it out together.
You mean like it's possible to make things happen? That like, you
Yeah,
can actually make things happen that maybe you couldn't before.
you're not reliant. I mean, you can, when I was a kid, I took pictures with Allen Ginsberg, the great writer, and he said something to me that didn't make sense as a teenager, but I think about it now. And he's required reading, and he said, "Oh, this rent control." He had an apartment on 12th Street. This rent control apartment lets me be a writer, and I thought that was such a good way of looking at it. Like he didn't want to buy a mansion being a writer. He understood, hey, if I stay in this rent control apartment, I could be a writer. Turns out he's pretty good, but but
It doesn't
but I
hurt to
think
be.
it doesn't hurt. But everyone has an opportunity now. If you want to be an actor or director or whatever because you want to buy a huge house, maybe that's not the right path. Probably better off trying a different one.
That's a really, really good point that I've never heard put that way. It comes
Yeah.
through
Well,
from
Allen
Allen
Ginsberg's very
Ginsberg
good
through
at those
you, but
points.
that if you can find a sustainable path, basically, to doing it.
Yeah, you don't need all that nuttiness,
Yeah.
Like, who cares? You don't need big actors. I mean, if you're blessed that they show up, cool. And if they don't, who cares? Put it on
Yeah.
freaking YouTube. Nobody
Well, they
cares.
showed we have to wrap too, but they showed for you. Is there anything about the people that you worked with or working on Riff Raff that like a story maybe about the process or the collaborations that you can share before we go?
Well, I loved every bit of it because it was like a revolving door of like, oh my God, look who's here today. When it's Gabrielle Union, it's Miles, it's Bill Murray, it's Pete Day. I mean, it's nuts. So
Yeah.
it would be, I could go on forever. And one day we're walking down the street, we'll talk about it. But it was just a great experience. And I love the film. So that's the most important thing. I just saw an interview with Bill Murray and he said, we got to do something good first and then we'll be friends. And I was like, oh, I like that. It's very important to me that we give everything possible to it. It's a blessing to be able to do this stuff. So I bleed for it, and then I want to kill anybody that doesn't like it. But that said, I have to deal.
So what's next? Like you have probably a bunch of stuff that's possible, but like what's the like do you have something that's immediate next that's like this is the next
Yeah, I mean, I'm always writing, and trying to figure stuff out, and who knows? I mean, it could be tomorrow, it could be next year, but I'm not waiting. So
Yeah.
if you killed somebody and you're really sorry, send me your script.
That's a great line. We'll end there. Thanks so much,
Cool.
This was really fun.